Hello, everybody. It is a 9 a.m. here in Los Angeles. And it is, Thursday, May 8th, AD 2025. We will be taking your calls, but I have a guest today. I will have a guest. Dyan Burns. Oh, Lord. What is my name, Joel? I have my Hake sign backwards. Shout out to Joel. He'd be like, which way does it face? Backwards or forward? I'm talking about this sign that a man made for us. Hello to the people over on pilled.net/The Hake Report. I'm live on punchy.tv/Hake. I should be live on BitChute. But what's up, Rumble people? Oh, let me make sure that I have you over here. Hello, Rumble people. What's up, Galahad? I recognize you. Yeah, so Dyan Burns, he's going to be with us. And you can call in and attack, metaphorically speaking, or converse and show love for Dyan Burns of the Hippy Dippy Round Table legendary stuff. Dyan Burns, as you guys know, has been on the Hake Report many times. If you have been catching Hake for any amount of time, longer than like a year, and he's spent much time in the Ukraine. Shout out to the Ukrainians. I know some Ukrainians. Because there's that war going on over there. So he's been doing some documentaries and stuff. Pretty interesting stuff. A young man from back east, New England, I guess. I don't know. Sort of a Democrat, young 20. He turned drinking age, they say. Terrible. Not long ago. So he's probably in his early to going on mid-20s. And so do catch him. You can find him on Dyan Burns Live as well as Dyan Burns TV on his YouTube channel. He has hosted Hake before. And let's find out. Night. Oh, terrible. No. What in the world? Oh, that'll fix itself, right?
Yeah, he hasn't joined.
Okay, cool. Nice.
That'll be Dyan when he joins.
Catch this, guys. Whoa! I think I'm going to break the computer if I do that. Let me turn that off. Oh, Lord. Let me get ready, guys. Yeah, so Dyan Burns is going to be joining us. Many of you guys have called in before to talk to him. So I'm excited about that. Multiple issues in the thing. Turn it back on. Multiple instances. Oh, okay. Never mind. That's nothing. Just Hake being a boomer. So, here, let me do this. Ring. I'm eliminating all the magic. We're looking at the beach, and we're having some fun. Let me. While we're waiting for Dyan Burns to join, let me quickly. Oh man. Oh no, it's just the mirror thing. I was reacting to the mirroring. Let me talk to Ryan in Illinois before we get started with the show here. Ryan in Illinois, as I'm setting up, how you doing, man?
What's going on? Hey?
Not much. It's good to hear from you. Thanks, Nick.
Can you hear me? Hey?
Whoa! Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
He hung up.
Oh.
Or something.
Thanks, Nick. What a mess. Okay, then Mark in Los Angeles, California. He must have, I don't know, something issue going on. What's up, Mark? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey.
How you doing?
Doing fine, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted a couple of things. I wanted to answer Ronnie.
Yeah.
in regards to the questions the statement he made to you yesterday. I wasn't able to get through to respond. Basically, my statement was, why do blacks score 10 to 15 IQ points lower than whites?
Yeah.
He had no answer. He wanted to challenge me to an IQ test. Diversion, he doesn't want to answer the question, and that's typical of liberals. The other thing I mentioned that he mentioned was the black murder rate. Blacks murder more than whites, Asians, and Hispanics combined. That's a FBI stat that can be looked up. He said something about he had to look at other numbers. He had to look at it's all BS.
Bogus speech.
Everything he said was BS. He had no answers for anything. Just, I'll challenge you to an IQ test. Even if I scored 0, that wouldn't prove anything. Blacks continue to score 10 to 15 IQ points lower than whites, and it's not environmental, it's genetic.
Okay.
But he's not up on that enough. The other thing I wanted to say to you, Hake, on another issue.
Real fast.
First of all, I want Ed Martin to be district attorney in Washington, D.C. He's pro-Trump. He's ultra-conservative. And we got one rhino by the name of Tom Tillis standing in his way. He's a Republican sellout. We'll see what happens. If he loses and Brosberg, the commie judge, gets to pick that man, it'll be a leftist like Jack Smith. And finally, the last thing I want to say, I saw the interview on Pierce Morgan with that, what's her name?
The one I was talking about. Yeah.
She's great.
Right.
Get her on your show if you can.
Okay. Thank you, man.
Yeah. Are you going to try?
We'll see. We'll see. I'm not sure.
Who is Dyan Burns?
He's been on my show many times. You may recognize him once you start hearing his voice and listening through.
Yeah, but I can't call back. What's his thing?
The Ukraine, Democrat politics.
Pro-war. He's the pro-war guy. he must love Trump. Tell him Ukraine, if you could, because I won't be able to call back. Ukraine already signed the minerals deal. Trump isn't going to take any more BS from that money launderer that Dyan Burns loves so much. And I support Putin over Ukraine. And that's all I've got for you, Hake.
Okay. Interesting. Well, thank you, man.
Yes,
hey,
can I call back to talk to him today?
No, I think you've put out your comment, and we'll see. We'll see if he has anything to say about it. I think he may have heard you.
Just now?
Yeah, I think he's connecting now, so he may have heard you.
Can I get on with him before you hang up?
You are so pushy. I think.
Thank you.
You know what? Dylan, are you there? Dyan Burns of Dyan Burns TV, Dyan Burns Live. Is it the bass guitar? Or can you hear me?
Hey, can you hear me? I can hear you.
I can hear you. Did you hear my caller Mark from Los Angeles just now, Dylan?
Yeah, I heard all of that.
What do you...
Can I repeat it for the audience?
Say again?
I just wanted to repeat it for the audience.
Sure, let's hear it.
Okay, Trump is not taking any BS from that corrupt guy in the Ukraine. He's a corrupt individual. He's a money launderer. And why do you think the Dems and the rhinos are wanting to give him so much? It's coming back to him. Look how Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi, and some Republicans have enriched themselves from this phony Ukraine war. We don't owe the Ukrainians 5 cents. All they do is launder our money. And the other thing I want to say before I get hung up on, Trump's got the minerals. He's got the rights to the minerals. And Zelensky is not going to push us around anymore. I don't know what Dyan Burns' motivation is to support those criminals, but we're wise to what you and the Dems and the rhinos are doing, and Ukraine could go straight to HELL.
Wow.
Says. I don't like Ukraine. They're a corrupt country, very corrupt.
Okay.
Not to say Putin's an angel. Putin's not an angel, but we shouldn't have to take sides on this. It was Obama that gave the Crimea to the Russians. There was no war. So now Trump gets in, and they want to try to start something. Trump had nothing to do with this Ukrainian-Russian war. and now he's stuck having to find a way to make peace with him. I'm blaming Ukraine, and I'm saying let's just stay out of it, and whatever happens over there, it's on them. That's my comment.
All right. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
All right. Bye. Wow. It's good to have you back. It's good to have you. Oh, pardon me. It's good to have you back there, Dyan Burns.
Happy to be back, Hake. That was a great intro. I think, he convinced me. I'm now with Putin, It's good. It was all good points.
It's funny because he said he's with Putin, but that we shouldn't be taking sides. And
yeah, we're with Putin, but we're not. But we're not taking sides. But I'm with Putin, but I'm not taking sides. But I'm with Putin.
Is there any validity to this money laundering claim? I don't know or really
well, there was
care.
a few things he repeated, America doesn't owe this or owe that. People can talk about our historical agreements of asking them to give up their atomic weapons under agreements where we would come to their assistance, or previous agreements made by the last administration. And when a nation makes an agreement with America, they don't say, oh, I made an agreement with Biden. Oh, I made an agreement with Hillary. Oh, I made an agreement with Obama. They say, we made an agreement with the president of the United States, who is a representative of the United States. And so I do think that when the United States gives a nation its word, it should stand up for its word. And I don't think it's for a bad cause. But as for the money laundering, I think most people who talk about money laundering in this case, to hear numbers like $350 billion, which are not accurate numbers for how much the Ukrainians have been given from the United States, but they hear big numbers like that, then they look at the battlefield and they don't see either a massive change or the immediate impact of that money because of these long aid flows. And there's so many rumors online, they've come to the opinion that when we send artillery shells over there, they sell them off. But honestly, the corruption in Ukraine that I am aware of and that I see has to do with people giving government contracts to their friends. And so instead of looking at the best company, you give it to this new company that was started by Shell, just so they could skim off like 20% off the top and, enrich themselves and then do a piss poor job. That's the type of corruption that I see.
Selfish
I
type
don't
stuff.
see the reselling of artillery shells or tanks or the type of equipment that we're giving them because they're in desperate need of those for national defense. And all of the allegations that I have seen, I haven't seen them validated. I think the money laundering is mostly just rumor. And until I can see any physical evidence of it, then yeah, they just actually released like fiscal reports for the personal wealth of a lot of Ukrainian politicians. You can see the types of luxury cars they have. You can see the type of watches they have, how much property they own. And I hope people go look at it. The Kiev Independent released an article on it if they want to look at the type of wealth that the richest in Ukrainian society have. But as for the money laundering of American military gear, that has not been proven.
Okay. Zelensky was already rich before he became president. Is that true? I heard.
Yes, Zelensky was Paddington Bear. I don't know if you're familiar with the cartoon bear Paddington with the red hat and the little rain jacket. He was the voice of Paddington, actually, in Ukraine.
Whoa!
And but that's what I know him from. But he's most known from a TV show where he played the president of Ukraine as a normal everyday guy who like raged against the establishment, and then people saw a social media video of that, elected him, and that was the premise of the show. And he also has been on a few comedy shows. He actually used to go back in the day to Russia for those New Year celebrations. And you can see these really bizarre videos of all the biggest names in Russian state television clapping along as Zelensky sings songs back in like 2020, like 2012 or 2011 or something. It's very surreal. But yeah, Zelensky's had a long career in media, a very long career.
A lot has changed. What a mess. That's crazy, man. Wow. Do you have hope for our greatest president being able to bring peace? That's, Trump. I don't know if I've talked to you since Trump won.
Not really. No, you haven't. We haven't talked since Trump won. We haven't talked at all.
And God is your shotgun.
God is my shotgun. Yes, yes.
Are you in Ukraine right now?
Yes, I am in
Not
Ukraine.
to dox.
I just got back to Ukraine earlier this week. We're going to be heading over to the Donetsk region later this week, or at least going into next week, because we want to start filming on the front again, try to document what the conditions are like, what the soldiers are experiencing. you know, how they're performing, you know, what's going on in certain key cities that I care a lot about and I'm filming documentaries on.
How many documentaries have you come out with? I saw one pretty recently with the
Yeah, recently I
human
released
safari.
the one on in Kherson, on the human safari in Kherson. There's this a phenomenon where civilians keep getting hit by Russian drones, FPV drones, and drone dropping grenades, and it's hit ambulance crews, it's hit fire trucks, it's hit civilian vehicles and rescue crews, people on bikes, civilians walking down the street. I interviewed the victims of them, which were in, you know, some of them were walking to get medicines for their husbands. Some of them were just in the market buying watermelons. Really, a lot of these attacks seem to be almost completely random. And most of the evidence that I gathered from the video evidence side of it was provided by the Russians themselves. I remember being in Kherson the first time after the Novgorodka Dam blew up, and they bombed us on an aid mission on the water, and then released video of it and just said that I was in Azov and, you know, we were like going to make a bridgehead. So there seems to be a reputation, especially in this area, but this has been reported on other parts of the front as well, of this type of targeting of civilians. That was my last documentary released on my main channel, Dyan Burns TV, if anybody wanted to go listen to the testimony. But I've released probably like 10, 11, or 12 documentaries. Some of them are much larger, some of them are shorter.
Have you learned Ukrainian language?
I take Ukrainian lessons every week. I mostly know like quick battlefield stuff like Askil or blindage, bunker. But the longer sentences, it's a you know, I still have difficulty. I'll know like 1 out of every 5 words. I'm still working on it.
Nice. That's crazy, man. You've been over there off and on basically for what? How many years now? 3?
This is going on 4 years now. So this is going to be, once this year's up, this will be my 4th year. So I've been doing this for a bit now. Yeah.
I know that you, since like high school, young age, you've been into what you called foreign policy. And is that why? What got you into foreign policy? Why did you go over to the Ukraine?
I think when I was younger, I first got interested in, I guess, the closest you could say to like this type of interest was in late middle school. I was watching the Syrian civil war through a lot of OPSEC. So these like video footage taken on iPhones across the front line where different jihadi fighters would record something, post it online, and their location would be here. And this was one of the first major wars where I saw, at least personally, people like, okay, this happened here, so this means they took this village. And we saw that this video footage came from here, so that means this faction took this village. And watching those map change and knowing that I had access to the information that like 50 years ago, you know, people would pay top dollar for this type of live action, live coverage. And I could just see that free online. And so during lunchtime, I would go off, you know, take my lunch, go in the middle of the lunchroom into the little corner, and I would follow all this information as it was coming in. And from there, I took some classes at the University of Maryland that focused on international relations. I wanted to know about the political dynamics behind this. And from there, an interest grew and grew until eventually when the invasion happened and I had my show, and the experts got a lot of the things wrong, I thought, how could I improve my coverage? I could either buy a studio, you know, get a studio, rent it out maybe, or I could use the money that I've made to go on the ground and try to maybe get better coverage than the experts got. And that's what I went for because, you know, I feel like a lot of this needs to be documented because there's a lot of stuff happening. And sometimes I only see like, I remember once I was in Mykolaiv and there was like 10 to 12 hours of bombing and it was a whole experience. It was an entire day. It was, you know, kind of scary. And then I read the paper and it just says Mykolaiv, 3 dead, 9 wounded. And that's the entirety of the report.
Right.
And from my perspective, there was a lot that would happen in that 10 to 12 hour period that I felt should be demonstrated. That I think that having more cameras on the ground recording these experiences is useful.
And you're not concerned for your life, or you are concerned and you're careful, but you know that it like anything could happen.
I mean, I'm concerned for my life. I'm not trying to get myself killed, but I also understand that if I want to do this type of work, if you want to document the war, you can't be over in Poland. You can't be in Lviv. If you want to get the war, you got to be where the war is. And so that means not just accepting what the government says, this is happening on this front.
Right.
You have to go out there and you need to see what's happening. You can't just accept what the rumor is. You got to go and check if the rumor is true. And that's why I felt I had to go to Kherson after all these reports of the human safari and document it myself, instead of just like, well, I saw this post on Twitter, which is how a lot of other people were learning about it. I saw a post on Twitter about it. It's like, well, that's not proof. That's not evidence. And so I wanted to go there and see if I could add a little bit to it in a way that people could consume in documentary form.
So this human safari thing, it's is it like rogue soldiers, or is it green lit from the top of soldiers, if you will, the drone operators just targeting anybody in this area to scare them, to get them out? What is it?
It's hard to say exactly who is the one saying to engage in this behavior, because we don't have the access to those private communications, and there isn't no speech where Putin said, go out and hunt the people of Kherson or something like that, or Sergei Shoigu. What we are getting when it comes to comments on what's happening in Kherson, it's either rumors or what the Russians say themselves. And so let's stick with what the Russians say themselves, because, you know, we can see that. So what the Russians will usually do is they'll take these videos of, say, them blowing up somebody on a bike.
So it's drone footage that's recorded remotely, and then they share it.
Yes, remotely recorded
before the drone
is
destroyed or whatever, or drops the bomb.
They'll have one drone recording footage and another drone that'll come in and attack, or they'll have just the FPV footage, so the drone that's about to ram, and you'll see it as it comes in, and then the footage will cut off, or a drone dropping drone where it's above it, and you can see below as the grenade goes down and hits the person, they fall over, twitch on the ground a few times, you know, something along those lines.
Terrible.
And so these are usually the main ways that which this happens. And after they post this footage on social media, they usually put some amount of rock music, pop music, some popular Russian song over it. And then under it, they'll leave a message about where exactly in the city it was, if it was in the west side, east side, what side of the city. And they'll usually say that this was a person in civilian clothing. So they'll never say explicitly, we're bombing civilians.
Right.
We're bombing people in civilian clothing. Now, the reason they make this distinction, I believe, is because they're trying to say, well, it's possible that this is a Ukrainian soldier who happens to have a grocery bag and is riding like in this area on his bike. I mean, it could also be, you know, a random person just, you know, taking their groceries home, because many civilians still live in Kherson. I spent time with them. There's still churches open in Kherson. I've gone to the churches that have shrapnel holes where they have the baptism pools because of the bombing in the area. And so I don't really buy it as an excuse, and I don't think that that's like making sure enough that they're just saying it might be a soldier, but they're in civilian clothing. So they can't say it's a soldier. They just say if it's somebody in civilian clothing is usually what you'll get. And then after it, it'll say, there'll be this message of everybody in Kherson should leave. Everybody in Kherson should leave, or you should minimize your movement as much as possible because we cannot guarantee your protection.
Wow.
And so they think that message, along with the vagueness by which they address their clothing, protects them when it comes to striking these people. Now, why they're doing it, I talk about a little bit my speculations in the video. There's a possibility that they think that by pushing out as many people out of the city as possible, they can undercut the city's economy, undercut the functioning of the city, and therefore it's bringing burden upon Ukrainian life. It makes them like, oh, do I really want to continue with this war? I just want the bombing in my backyard to stop. There could be an idea that if you move out all the civilians, if you scare them all away, then any movement you see is military. So that means like anytime you see any movement, you can just bomb it. So that could be the military logic behind it. The rumor that everybody keeps talking about, and I want to say this is rumor, not confirmed, is that they keep rotating the new drone units into the area, and they train on the Kherson locals. And then after training on the Kherson locals, they rotate them to other parts of the front where they can go for the people who know how to fight the drones instead of like the old guy who, walking with his walking cane and such. But that's just rumor, and there's a bunch of rumors around this.
Is this the type of thing that happens on pretty much all sides of any war, where especially like young guys who get caught up in killing and all that stuff, there's some young guys who just go crazy on them, and then some
There is a certain amount of brutality and dehumanization that might be inherent in war no matter what. That's not to ever excuse it. That's just to say that it's documented that again and again and again, when human beings are meant to take the other lives of human beings, it pushes them into dark places. And governments tend to go to dark places in their propaganda and their dehumanization and in their actions in order to prepare people to do those things. What's particularly special about this is how widespread it is. How common it is, and the fact that they post videos of it constantly. And that every day, if you go to these, and I can send you the links if you wanted to check it yourself. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you really wanted to, where every single day you can see like 3 to 4 videos of somebody just walking down the street, getting a grenade dropped on them, and you'll see civilian clothing. Nobody should be here, and that for them, that's enough. And I interviewed some of the victims of these, and it is grandmothers, it is, you know, old women. Most honestly, and most of the people I interviewed that were victims were just old women.
So old women don't really have the wherewithal or ability to get out of there. Because I wonder, like, are there a lot? I would imagine that a lot of people did leave because they don't want to be in an area.
A lot have left. Kherson is not what it used to be. Most of the people have left, but some people don't leave because they buried their kids in their backyard, and the idea of leaving that home is just impossible for them. Some people don't leave because they don't know if they're going to be able to pay the rent that's in Kiev, which is going to be much more expensive, and they've lived their whole life here, and you know all the property and all the things they ever owned is in their yard, and they just can't abandon that. Some are afraid of what will happen if they leave and the Russians take it and then they sell it to somebody else, because that happened a lot in Mariupol, where people's homes were sold off to people who are coming and settling. And there's people who are still, I mean, this is a minority, but people who are, you know, one day waiting that, well, I don't really care who takes what. I just, you know, this is my house, and if the Russians take over, yippee. If they don't take over, well, whatever. But there's a bunch of reasons as to why people stay, but there are still a significant amount of civilians in here. So some people are just hard-headed.
Yeah.
I think everyone knows somebody like that.
All right, so you don't have high hopes for Trump resolving this?
No, I don't have high hopes for Trump resolving this.
Is it better or worse than Biden? Out of curiosity, real quick.
Honestly, right now, the best I'm kind of hoping for feels like the same.
Okay.
And I feel like we might be going on the track of the same, but with a lot more confusion at the start of it.
Go ahead with your answer.
And the reason why is before, like with Biden, my issue was, okay, we're dragging this out by not front loading a lot of this aid. Some of it had to do with, you know, we didn't have these many artillery shells, and so there's only so many you can send if you don't have enough supply. But when it comes to certain decisions or certain investments that should have been made early on, and this is also true for the Europeans as well, who are now starting to lift the debt cap in Germany, starting to take actions that probably should have been taken 2 to 3 years ago. My problem was always the speed of action, or, you know, not going far enough earlier on. But when it comes to Trump,
interesting.
And the result of that was like a little bit of aid to keep him alive. Maybe not enough aid to necessarily win the war is usually how it's talked about.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Then we come to Trump.
That makes so much sense. Before you get on to Trump, that makes so much sense. If we're going to help them all the way and dominate, and not just a paltry thing where you give, it looks like a lot, but it's not enough to just dominate and win and push them back and be done with it.
Absolutely, because if we're going to enter this period of, you know, this type of gigantic war, we want it to be short.
Yeah.
Not only because we want there to be like less deaths, but also because we don't want the crisis to have more points of potential failure.
Right.
The longer it goes on, there's more potentiality for crises.
Entrenched.
And so Biden had a reservation because of the threat of atomic war, and he was trying to be careful. And I appreciate, you know, somebody who at least understands what that means, since he, you know, grew up in the Cold War. You know, he was born during the Second World War, so this is the age. He is probably more familiar than a lot of more, you know, the younger politicians of this potential threat. But that shouldn't freeze the hands of the president in moments of decisive decision making.
Yeah, Trump said.
But when it comes to Trump,
before you get to Trump, this reminds me of what Trump said at the very beginning of the war. Trump says, "I would have told Putin, if you go in there, I'm bombing Moscow." Something like that. Didn't he say something like that in some interview when he was? He
said something. I remember he said he would paint F-16s with Chinese symbols, and then he would bomb the Russians to make it look like maybe it was the Chinese that did it. I remember in that reference when and he would bomb Russia while masking it to make it look like a Chinese operation to confuse it. Maybe it was kind of a reference to the Russians in Crimea, the little green men. They don't exactly know like what they're like, who they are. Like I think maybe it could have been, but I don't know for sure.
Okay, so get to Trump. I interrupted you a couple times.
For Trump, my problem with Trump is you can't make if it was a campaign thing, the 24 hours, or when he was debating Harris and said, I would end the war before I'm president. He said that when he was debating Harris. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
But he said that once I am president-elect of the United States, Putin's going to come to me and he's going to basically almost like beg to end the war. And then it became later on the campaign trail, the 24-hour promise. Once, that was, they probably realized that was an extremely unrealistic standard to set. So they just replaced it with a still very unrealistic standard. And then when 24 hours came around, they said, well, now it's 100 days, right? Well, now 100 days has passed. So by every metric that I can judge Trump by his own words, as the straight shooter that everybody comes to me and tells me he is, he has not succeeded by what he has wanted to do. And I am not very surprised by this outcome because I think that the way that the Trump administration has approached this not only showed a certain amount of naivete as to who the Russians are, but also into what's going to get the Russians to act. Because from the way that a lot of people talked about it, it seemed like I get there, I talk to this side, I talk to that side, they come together and they have to make a deal because Trump's at the table and I'm the big guy. And then he acts a lot like the big guy towards Zelensky. He calls him a dictator. He stands up to him in this Oval Office meeting and starts, with the back of the fourth. And we all saw what happened there.
Yeah.
And then we saw the cutoff of aid. We saw the cutoff of cyber support. We saw the cutoff of the program to help the kidnapped children at Yale. We saw the cutting off of all the U.S. aid. We saw the cutoff of the military aid. And so he added all this pressure. And the Ukrainians gave Trump eventually the mineral deal. They gave Trump the immediate unilateral ceasefire of 30 days. They gave Trump a lot of credit in the open media when it comes to saying Trump is peace through strength. If you listen a lot to what Zelensky says, he doesn't really often attack Trump. If anything, he attacks some of the people whom he thinks might be misinforming Trump. Or it's never like Trump is a weak man or Trump is this or Trump is that. It's people are misinforming Trump or mistruths are getting to the president. Like, for example, what happened with the Kursk encirclement. I have no clue what the president's referring to. I know a lot of the people who are in Kursk. None of them ever told me about no encirclement. But he kept repeating this. And I think these moments where Zelensky sees this physical truth or Ukrainians see these physical truths on the ground, and then they hear something different from the president, that has started to cause a certain amount of mistrust between Ukrainians and Donald Trump. And when they compounded that with all these cuts off in support, the Ukrainian population has really lowered their opinion of the president of the United States since the start of this process. Now, that might not matter to a lot of people, but it does matter a lot to me because Ukrainians in this country really have a high opinion of the United States as a bastion of freedom, generally speaking, going into this war as the nation that actually is standing up for its values. And it really sucks to see that change because of just what feels like the sporadic behavior of these negotiations. I'm really hoping to see that now that these negotiations have failed and J.D. Vance and Donald Trump seem to be openly identifying that the Russians are the problem, that they're being too greedy is what J.D. Vance basically said this morning, that there is a change in strategy where we start putting more physical pressure on the Russians. They're, i.e., saying to them what Trump said he would do on the campaign trail. More aid to the Ukrainians, more than Joe Biden would do to make them go, whoa, this isn't the same guy we're dealing with. This is a cowboy. This is Donald Trump. And stronger sanctions and sanctions like you wouldn't believe, sanctions that would really pressure them to say our economy can't last for 2 more years. Make it so it's not a question of negotiating an end to the war. Make it so that the war is unfightable.
I get the sense that you kind of like Trump, even though you're a Democrat. And think
I don't know if I don't really. I find Trump to be entertaining. I still find Trump to be entertaining. I think he would be a great I always said that I would love it if Trump had an official permanent position of a presidential gesture, where every time like someone becomes president, Trump gets to go in there for an hour and just say, okay, first off, you're a loser, just for like an hour, just go off. I would appreciate that. I just think that his politics are terrible.
I really, one thing I like that's different from Biden with regard to this Ukraine thing is that he's actually talking to Putin or Putin's people. Whereas it sounded like, or had the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that Biden and that team didn't even talk to Putin. Is that true?
They did not have official communications between Biden and Putin. There was military peer-to-peer communications. I remember Richard Woodruff reporting really spectacular communications between Lloyd Austin and the Russian defense minister Sergei Shoigu about and it's really like tense show off, but it's showing that they do have communication because their military officials are communicating, but they didn't have direct diplomatic, hey, here's how we end the war here. There was reports of indirect communication through businessmen who had like ties in both countries to like say, so is there any way we can end and basically the demands were so out there that the Biden administration said to engage in diplomacy right now would be a waste of time because the Russian demands are just too crazy. That's been my position as well. Like, I'm not against negotiations. It's just my position has always been, if we enter them, we need to know when to walk away from the table because we can't go there under the idea that we'll accept whatever you offer us or we're going to get our pockets snatched. And that's what I think the Russians have tried to do in this diplomatic process is demand the maximalist position that they, demanded 2.5 or 3 years ago, not accept what would have been honestly a pretty endearing compromise for a lot of other Russian leadership if they hadn't dug themselves into this hole of what they said their new war aims are a few years ago. And I think that the obvious move forward now is to readjust Russian thinking through the application of pressure.
Before I get to calls, are you, in reference to my first call that we talked with Mark, are you pro-war? He called you pro-war.
I would like to go home as soon as possible. I like crab cakes. I like big, fat, cheesy pizza. I like the American radio stations and not all just the dubstep and techno pop that I hear on the radio waves here. I have found one thing traveling through Europe, and while I like the walkability of some Dutch and European streets, I am a Yankee, and I'd like to go home. And I also don't like feeling drones fly over me, but I do also believe that wars are not as simply ended by just surrendering or just telling the other side you'll give them whatever you want. And I also think that if the Ukrainians were to demilitarize as the Russians are demanding, that this could end up extending the war, not only into other countries, but into another wave a few years from now. Because I don't want to have to come back in 10 years because we took the short way out. I would rather deal with it now.
What do you think, real quick, before I get to the calls and super chats, of them giving up permanently, officially, Crimea, Ukraine giving up Crimea, because Putin took Crimea in 2014 under Obama, right? And they've had hold of it, but it hasn't been approved by the rest of the world, pretty much.
Yeah.
And Trump offered peace for Crimea and whatever else. I don't know what else, but what about Crimea specifically? Letting them have. I think
that, well, you would have to, of course, the Ukrainian Rada would have to see Ukraine's parliament. So it's not as simple as Zelensky saying, like, okay, we need to give up Crimea and then it's done. As much as people talk about, like, Ukraine's America's proxy, they do have a independent legislative system that does have review. And so if they were to go through with that process, I would expect they'd want something in return. Because the Ukrainians, from their point of view, they've given the United States everything that they wanted. They agreed to the unilateral ceasefire. They agreed to the energy ceasefire that the Russians violated hours after. They agreed to the civilian ceasefire that the Russians never adhered to. They watched as the United States had peer-to-peer communication with the Russians, which for them, they wanted to be at the table since the start. So that's a concession they had to make early on. They made concessions on no more NATO membership. I mean, that's something that's been thrown out the door right before negotiations were really underway, on American troops being on the ground, acting as a strong deterrent. So from the Ukrainian position, they're like, okay, we've given up all this stuff. Now you're asking us to change the rules-based order in Europe, say that you can annex this territory here, but what are we getting in return? If the Ukrainians were told, fine, if you recognize Crimea, then the Russians will pull out of the rest of Kherson and Zaporizhia and give you back that occupied territory. I think Ukrainians might start to at least look at the idea more seriously. But right now, they don't want to just keep on giving and giving and giving without getting a concession in return. At some point, the Russians in negotiations, they say both sides walk away unhappy. Right now, the Russians are not that unhappy. That needs to change.
Okay. Do you understand Putin's side position? And what
I
is
have
it?
listened to his speeches and I've read his historical essays. I've done my best to understand it, and his position is that, if you mean his personal position and not just the immediate negotiating position, meaning the things he's ultimately striving for,
Yeah,
right?
what he
the things
wants,
he wants in the long run.
Yeah, what he wants
Yeah?
and the situation that he's in.
So what he wants is he wants to rebuild a powerful Russian world. Ruski Mir, as it's usually referred to. And that means that anywhere that he believes that, you know, the Russian language has touched, or his historical Russian clay, is somewhere that Russia either has direct control of or dominion of, i.e., Belarus is a strong allied state with deep cultural and economic ties and allied militarily, or Belarus doesn't exist.
Oh.
And if you listen to his opening speech of the war in Ukraine, that was essentially his pitch. He said that Ukraine can only exist as an entity if it is an extension of Russia, essentially saying that for Ukrainian existence to continue, it must work as an organ of Russian power, either as an ally under someone like Yanukovych, or as a member of, you know, the Russian Federation, therefore annexation. And so when in reference to Ukraine, I think that's ultimately what he wants. In reference to other places in Europe, I think that's still also what he would want. And that's what he's working towards in places like Romania, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia. And so I think that is ultimately what Russia would like to go towards, and certainly what Putin would like to go towards. As for the situation he's in right now, Ukraine, getting over Ukraine, conquering Ukraine, taking all of Ukraine is kind of integral to take any other next step. Because to leave this crisis in the state it is, and then try to open up another conflict in Georgia or another conflict in Armenia, you start dividing your attention too much. Something that I'm sure is deeply on the mind of Vladimir Putin is the fact that there are different economic crises in his other allied states. In Kazakhstan, they had a fuel crisis not too long ago that caused massive protests that were only stopped when the Russians sent the army over the border. In Belarus, just a few years ago, and there's new elections coming up. The last election season ended when bodies hit the floor when the Russian army came in and put down protesters who said the election was rigged, and then they put them down with force, and elections are right around the corner. And so when you have other crises that you have to put down with force, or say a mercenary leader that marches on your capital once he gets a little bit too rowdy, that starts to worry you. And so I think that ultimately, if he wants to get to any of these other objectives, he needs to keep pushing this war forward, either in a clandestine way during a ceasefire period or a peace period that could maybe later be reignited, or directly through this war just perpetuating and him continuing to drag his feet through the negotiation process until this pathway looks unviable for the foreseeable future, which is why I think pressure is the only way.
And are you Azov?
How'd you know?
That's what they said. The Russians said it on the internet, according to you. Okay, I have a few super chats before I get to the calls, and they do pertain to you, Dylan. Manuel bought 5 coffees. Dylan, do a documentary on how they built a crying wall of crystals in Ukraine during a war, but asked the USA for money, or overpricing ammo, military equipment to skim off the top, or 2 officials popped with $6 million in cash, or how Ukraine bombed civilians in 2014 during Obama starting this whole war. Can't cry wolf for doing the same. It says manual.
Sure, let me go through these. There's like a bunch of them. So can we keep that up so I can read it so I can
Yeah.
go back to it?
Yep. Yes, sir.
So I don't know anything about the Crying Wall of Crystals. From the way he phrases it, I assume that's like a monument of some sort, like a war monument or like a monument to maybe some massacre or tragedy. I have no clue. So I can't really answer to that. I wasn't aware of the monument, but yes, there are like American grants that sometimes go to art projects around the world, and the idea of that developing the arts, developing culture, developing the liberal arts, so to speak, is beneficial because we want these societies to be intellectually free. We believe freer societies are better societies and better allies. At least that's the ideology behind it. If that's what you mean, I need to answer for this in some way. I'm not the one who made this crying wall of crystals. As for the overpriced ammo,
it's Marina Abramovic, Crystal Wall of Crying, commemorates.
Is it a monument in some way?
Commemorates 2021 commemorates Jews killed in Babin Yar massacre. If that rings any
the
bell.
Babin Yar massacre. So there were the Ukrainian nationalists massacred Jews and massacred Poles during a lot of historical tragedies, and this is one of the massacres that is being referred to. Then I've never gone to this monument, so I'm not familiar with it. But I guess we helped provide money to a memorial about a tragedy. I don't know how I have to answer to that, but as for the overpriced ammo military equipment,
No, he just wants you to do a documentary on it.
Oh, a documentary on it.
Yeah. Your next,
maybe. I mean, probably after the war. I think I want to cover the tragedies that are happening right now and not 80 years ago.
Okay.
As for the ammo and military equipment, the biggest scandal I can think of is the military jacket scandal from the former defense minister who was let go after it. Basically, they were paying like double or almost triple in price for military jackets than they should have been to a provider who was providing subpar jackets. So it wasn't that these were exceptional jackets that they're paying a lot of money for. It's that they were probably skimming off the top of these jackets and able to pocket some of the money. And like I said, that's how a lot of the corruption scandals I said earlier worked, where they give their friends their contracts, they then provide whatever service, maybe make it overpriced, skim off the top, and that's how a lot of Ukrainian corruption works, which is a little different than aid package of ammunition shells comes in and then they sell it to some arms dealer in some shady alleyway who then routes it to the cartels or something or whatever you tend to see online. As for the Ukraine bombed civilians in 2014, I assume what they're referring to is in 2014 after the Russians invaded and annexed Crimea and they held up the Crimean parliament at gunpoint and such and took over the Crimean Peninsula. The Russian-backed separatists and Russian agents and forces moved into the Donbass and they started a rebellion, which was calling for like separation from Ukraine and like joining Russia as part of these independent republics. And then the Ukrainian government sent an army down to fight them, and they fought some pretty brutal battles. And there was a lot of shelling. And there was bombing that from both sides that hit civilian areas during that period, from both the Russian side and the Ukrainian side. And then as the Ukrainians were about to win, the Russians sent their army in directly to stop them from crushing the rebellion. And then at that point, the Ukrainians were pushed back a little bit, and that's where the war froze up until basically 2022. So, there was bombing of civilians there, but it was no more typical than you would expect of the brutality of the war at the time.
Crazy stuff going on in the world. And Lord Bibby42 gave a coffee saying, cool. What does he say? Dylan, sick mullet, bro. He says, glad to see you on the Hake report again. Stay safe, amigo. God bless. Also, happy birthday, Hake. Thank you, Lord Bibby42. Appreciate that.
This isn't a mullet, though. It's just long hair, but maybe I should go for a mullet.
Terrible. I call it hockey hair. But we got to get back to calls. Kevin in New York is on the line here. A lot of people want to talk about this stuff. Kevin, thank you for calling and holding your live with Dyan Burns.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Hake.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Dylan, you're Ukrainian?
No.
No?
Nope.
Oh, all right. Well, regardless, I feel like Ukrainians need a little bit of tough love, and I'm trying to be respectful as I can while talking about this. But earlier in the conversation, you said something along the lines of when the United States makes a deal with another country and that other country understands that deal, they don't see it as making a deal with that particular president, but instead making the deal with the country instead. Well, first of all, there's a problem with that because if any country from around the world is seeking to ask America for assistance with money, military aid, then it is the responsibility of that country to do all they can to find out about that country. And where I'm going with that is that things change here in America, okay? From the Joe Biden administration to the Trump administration, things change. America is in the middle of trying to wrestle corruption out of the hands of the corrupt people. And so we're getting that with Trump. Did you not hear Trump when he said that he wanted people from both sides to stop dying? You know, in a sense, Dylan, I don't mean any disrespect, but you're boring us with a lot of facts. I can say easily that yes, there's corruption with the Russians, there's corruption with Ukraine, but the United States itself has long lost the moral high ground of trying to act like the police of the world. And I think a lot of Americans recognize that, and that's also something that we get with Trump, is that he understands that we don't want to act like the police of the world anymore, and that the world is going to have to realize that. You know, and with Biden, I mean, along with trying to get to know America and that things change, do you not know that Biden and the people that we basically consider to be corrupt are globalists? That's why we've had this constant stream of sending billions of dollars to Ukraine and military aid every month. You know, this goes beyond what Biden wanted to do, but it was a part of a globalist agenda, which we don't want to be involved with anymore.
That's true. It's all for naught. If you don't do it all the way, do it all the way or do it not at all.
I have a question, Dylan. Do you want Ukraine to win the war against Russia?
Yes.
See, I have a major problem with that. It's unrealistic. It's living in your imagination. All right. Maybe it would be great if they won the war against Russia, but it's by no means realistic. Okay? It just really isn't. You can tackle that from all different types of angles. First of all, Russia has nukes. Ukraine doesn't. It goes back to the conversation that I just said, that we have really no business in any of this. And what do you think is going to take for Ukraine to win this war against Russia? What do you want out of all of this?
Okay, so there's a lot. Should we go back to any of that, or just specifically this line of questioning? Because it's saying like America's changed a lot. We could go down this line of questioning, but
I
when it
want
comes
to
to what Ukraine would need to win, I think that if they continue with their drone production rates, that'll probably just deliver on its own. They're producing more fixed-wing aircraft drone this year than every other year combined, by like a rate of double. And even if you don't believe the official numbers, you cut it in half, it's still more than every other year. And the Russians are reporting those numbers on the ground, and it's affecting their energy production, which is the undercurrent of their economy. The Ukrainians also are continuing to entrench themselves along the front line and make every inch of territory cost heavily for the Russians. At the start of 2024, the average age for a Russian volunteer was 40. By the end of the year, it was 50 years old.
Wow.
And so Ukraine is the defender. They're defending along the front line, largely speaking. And from their perspective, they need to make the occupier bleed. And it costs a lot less to make somebody bleed as the defender than it does to make them bleed as the attacker. It's part of the reason why the Russians are relying on like 40 to 50% North Korean shells. My position isn't that the Ukrainians are going to push the Russians out of Crimea with tanks and helicopters and some like glorious Zelensky style mech machine. My position is they are playing role of the defender, who needs to make the attacker understand that they're not going to achieve all their war goals, treat them as an equal party, and make them an offer that the Ukrainian people can live with, because their current offer of demilitarization and occupation of 4 Ukrainian regions is not going to be palatable under any circumstance.
That's a lot of interesting facts, but it really didn't get to anything I was actually asking about. I don't mean any disrespect, but
Kevin, you cut out there.
Oh yes.
Come back to your phone.
With you. Sorry. Say again.
Oh, Kevin, thank you for your call, man. I gotta move forward. Thanks, man. Take care.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was interrupted, but I'm okay now.
Okay, well, but I gotta keep moving. I appreciate it, man.
Well, all right. Take care.
Take care.
By the way, I do want to just throw
ahead.
out there that it's one thing, because he said a lot, and I just kind of just let it flow. But it's one thing to say that the United States should not be the policeman of the world. It's another thing to say the United States should act like a den of snakes. It's one thing to say we don't need to go around and fix all the world's problems that have nothing to do with us, but we signed the Budapest Memorandum because we believed
that's the denuclearization thing.
Yeah, that they give up their atomic weapons, that it's in our benefit because we don't want to see any of these atomic weapons ending up on the black market in 5 years, and then some terror group buys it, put it in downtown New York, and then New York is not New York anymore, And no, we didn't want that, and so we made them, and in parts even like threatening to cut off food aid during one of their worst economic crises, signed this agreement under the auspices from their point of view that we would come and aid them if there was ever either the cynical, exploitation of, like trade coercion or some sort of coercion to try to take their land, or, some invasion of the style. And, that's what we're trying to deliver upon. Now, it's one thing to say, oh, the world has changed. We don't need this agreement or alliance anymore. But the reason that it's changed is because they don't have the leverage anymore. They gave us the nukes. So it's like, okay, well, I want to sell you this firearm, Hake. I hear you want this beautiful rifle. Well, okay, can I have the money? Thank you, Hake. Well, you've lost your leverage. Now I have the rifle and the money. We are being good diplomats on the world stage. So it's one thing to say, again, don't be the world's policeman going around thinking you're going to bring like gender equality to the people of like Timbuktu. But if you make an agreement with the nation state, I do think we should try to our very best to adhere by our word. And now we're making agreements with the Ukrainians where we get to see some financial benefit back towards us anyway. So I don't really see it as, the United States not looking out towards its interests. We have interests in Eastern Europe. That's why Trump negotiated the mineral deal.
Let's get to William in California on the line over here. William, I'm going to try to get to all your calls, guys. And we're going to get to domestic stuff, too, by the way. William, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, James?
Doing fine.
All right. I think we talked about this before. In my opinion, Ukraine, I look at Ukraine like I look at South Vietnam. Very corrupt. And we end up being there for... It turned out to be not really a good cause, but it was to keep communism at bay. But we were there too long. And I don't like how Ukraine is, and I've met a few of the people, they seem like we owe them something. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think the United States should be funding basically a guerrilla warfare to Ukraine, because Ukraine, what are they going to do? Are they going to advance to Moscow and take over Russia? No, that's not going to happen. And I'm just saying. And then what if Mexico was funded by Russia to fund a guerrilla war with the United States? Do you think that's going to turn out good for Mexico? Or they could just keep it going and keep getting funded and allowances from Russia to do it. It ain't going to happen. America won't let that happen. But I say this. It was corruption from the beginning with Barack Obama and Joe Biden for you to get these supplies. And I just don't like how the Ukrainians have a arrogant attitude about our money. And I think Trump put that guy in his place. But I've always looked at Ukraine as being a corrupt country, just like South Vietnam. And I don't think the United States needs to continue to supply them. I mean, we're supplying you against a nuclear power. It doesn't make any sense. You're not going to win that, just like the last caller said. Go ahead, I'll listen.
So I was raised by a Vietnam vet.
That's cool. Me too.
He was a machinist. He was a machinist for the federal government. He learned a lot in his time in Vietnam. And if there's anything I learned from being raised by a Vietnam vet and learning history about the war, is that atomic powers very much can lose to rinky-dink opponents that maybe under different circumstances, if we're all standing up in a big, wide open farm field, the North Vietnamese wouldn't have stood a chance against our B-52 bombers and the overwhelming power of our Marine Corps. We would have crushed them.
Pound for pound, no, they
fought in the mountains.
We fought in the mountains.
We fought in the jungles. We fought in the tunnels. We fought in the...
Hold on, William. Hold on. Let me let Dylan finish.
Go ahead and finish, Dylan. I'm sorry.
We fought on their turf under circumstances that benefited them because they knew the jungle, they knew the tunnels, they knew a lot of stuff that we did. Now, South Vietnamese allies, now they knew a lot of the area too, but there's only so many of them. And due to all the problems, like you mentioned, with corruption and abuses and drug use, oh my God, man, the South Vietnamese, they could, at least the army could.
South Vietnam weren't they very corrupt, Dylan?
They were very corrupt, but I would think the more apt comparison, comparison to the Vietnam War in this instance, in my opinion, would be, and I hate making this comparison because I was raised by a Vietnam vet, but I would think the Ukrainians are more apt to be called the NVA than they would be apt to be called the South Vietnamese. When you look at it from their perspective, yes, the Ukrainians do have an issue with the corruption. The Russians rank much worse on the corruption scale. And when I say much worse on the corruption scale, I mean by any international metric you can bring me. And the Ukrainians have been making strides in the last decade, whether it's been with the open bidding for government contracts that has helped save the government billions every year, or whether it's the fact that we've even had these high-profile scandals covered by independent, non-oligarch controlled outlets like the Kiev Independent with the military jackal scandal and otherwise. I'm not saying that Ukraine doesn't have a corruption problem, but when we talk about, for example, the things that they would need to win a war, like being able to not sell the artillery right out of the storehouses, that's not happening. They're not selling all the grenades away. They're not selling all of their air defense systems away because there's just too few that they couldn't afford their national survival to do that. And so my comparison is, from their perspective, they're the Vietnamese that needs to keep killing the foreign occupier until eventually the foreign occupier leaves. And so you could look at it from the perspective of the South Vietnamese, but I mean, from our perspective, we haven't lost a single U.S. soldier. We haven't lost a single American airman. We haven't had a single American casualty. We're more like the Russians supplying the NBA against the American Marines than we are the other way around.
But that's how unpopular the Ukrainians are, really, here in America. And most of the people that Ukraine I meet, they're yes, they are. And they're very ungrateful. And it's our money. And if you're in a situation where you can't win the war on your own, you might as well call yourself Russia. Because here's the deal. Mexico ain't coming here to do that. They're not, because you know why? We wouldn't allow China and Russia to supply them.
Yeah, but I would hope we also wouldn't invade Mexico.
But you guys are not in the same situation as America, though. See, Russia is a nuclear power. If you win this war, how are you going to do it, and what do you need to do it?
We were a nuclear power. We lost to the NVA. I mean, being an atomic power, a lot of atomic power.
NVA being North Vietnamese, right?
But what do you
the North Vietnamese. We lost to the Taliban, dude. We lost to...
Look, my dad was a Marine. You know what they did over there, man? They didn't surrender. The guys that fought for America over there, they didn't surrender. They were tough. They died, a lot of them, and it turned out to not be a good cause. So what I'm saying about Ukraine is that they're not too popular over here.
I got you, William. I got to move on, man.
Okay.
Appreciate your call.
Hey, but it's good talking to you.
Thank you.
Good talking to you. I just will say that there is still a lot of support for Ukraine in the United States. Most Americans don't seem to approve how the administration's handling it, according to polling I've seen. But I still think there's an immense lack of knowledge about what's happening on the ground.
Indeed. Let's get to change it up a little bit. Ryan in Illinois.
One last thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do want to say one last thing. I talk to Ukrainian soldiers all the time. I'm constantly told, and these are the people on the front line. I'm not talking to people in the United States who say they are Ukrainian or whoever this guy interacted with. But most of them say they're extremely grateful. I have been thanked probably more than 20, 25 times on camera by Ukrainian soldiers thanking for the aid that has been given. And I remember like one interview we're releasing this Saturday, the commander of a Skaval unit says, thank you for sending your aid. We understand you have other interests, but you guys choose to help us. Thank you for your aid. So I do want to express that there is thankfulness. And it's expressed to me because I'm the American that almost all of them get to talk to. They don't get to talk to many Americans.
All right, cool. Nice. We wish them well. We're praying for you guys. Ryan in Illinois is on the line. Ryan, you're live. Dyan Burns is here as well. You're talking about something else I happen to see.
No, look, yeah, since he here, I'm gonna call back tomorrow and tell you what I got on my mind for y'all.
Okay.
It's not the right time.
All
But
right,
I do want to say one thing.
Yeah.
Shout out to Marilyn. Shout out to Marilyn who called.
Hey.
Oh, okay.
Wait, Maryland.
Oh, Maryland is a woman. Because Dyan is from Maryland.
I thought you were shouting out the best state in the union, man.
No, I'm talking about the girl that called Jesse show earlier.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ryan.
Shout out to her. She the type of girl that we want to put babies inside.
Whoa, I gotta go,
her.
man. Thanks. I know you
Shout
do.
out.
Take care. Yeah, shout out. Ryan.
I just want to take that moment to shout out the state of Maryland.
Yeah.
Since you didn't.
So you are you still looking to run for office one day in Maryland?
Maybe. I love my state a lot. I'd probably want to do more local stuff before moving up to anything national because I would like to, for a moment, just be like, oh my God, the big crisis is that there's the pothole there.
Right.
That would be nice.
For real. Yeah, wouldn't that be so refreshing to deal with stuff that can actually be solved? Maybe. Okay, Robert in Kansas, been on hold forever. Robert, you're live with Dyan Burns.
Hey, hey, you civilians are so funny when you talk about war. It is good. When I come out there, we're going to the gym, okay, bud?
All right.
You're in, Dylan, right? Hi, Dylan.
Hello.
Kirsten, it's Kherson. Kherson, thank you. That's where you are right now?
No, that's where I filmed my last documentary I released. I'm in the Kiev area at the moment.
Excellent. Have you ever been up to Mariupol? Have you ever been up that way?
That was before my time. That got cut off real early in 2022. The only people that were there were really the few journalists that filmed that one documentary about like 28 days of Mariupol and the Azovstal guys.
So that's not somewhere you could go. I was going to say, if you do go, definitely get your batteries charged up, right? But yeah, it's interesting space you're in there, man. I would say, you were asking what's Putin's position, Dylan. I would just say it's the north shore of the Black Sea is his position, and he's not going to let that go.
Is that different from Crimea? Is Crimea and the North Shore two different places?
Yeah, the North Shore is like the coastline of Kherson and like the Kherson, southern Kherson, Zaporizhia, up to Mariupol.
Okay.
That was obviously.
And the name of that river, it's the Dnieper. You call it the Dnieper River? How do you say that?
The Dnieper.
Nipper?
It depends if there's the Dnipro and then there's the Dnieper. You can say it different ways. It depends if you're saying it Russian or Ukrainian.
Do you say Kiev or do you say Kiev?
I'm bad with pronunciation. I'll slip up and say it the wrong way sometimes, and then I'll get chewed out. I'll get chewed out hard. But I think that the Russians do want the coastline, and the Turks, I think, despise that idea. And so it is one thing to talk about like the Ukrainians within their own means, but the Turks don't want the Russians to dominate the Black Sea. They don't want them to have all that coastline because they want to be the dominant power in the area because they're the one who controls most of the coastline in there now. And so I do think that there are other regional powers that might have an interest in backing up Ukraine so they can continue to hold some regional dominance in that area. I hope the Ukrainians can get back Zaporizhia and Kherson because it would be, I think, real tragedies if they didn't.
What a mess.
Well, Turkey's Turkey. I think if they leave you Odessa and stop the warfare, as far as getting your land back, I mean, hey, but he's not gonna give it back. Same thing in Georgia, right? I mean, they want that coastline. So I have a question for both of you. It's kind of off the subject, but not really. It's like, why are all you Jews? Why do you go in the media?
Are you Jewish?
It's for Hake and for you, Dylan.
I'm not actually Jewish. I love the Jews. I'm very Jew friendly. Are you Jewish, Dyan Burns?
No, I'm not Jewish. My family comes from Pentecostal roots.
Are you Jewish friendly?
Yeah, I'm Jewish friendly.
All right. So then why are we going into the media?
I apologize.
Because, I was convinced. I was just convinced by them.
You have pretty high verbal IQ, Robert. Are you Jewish or are you just straight German?
I might be, sir. I got kind of a nose on me.
Yeah.
And then also another question is, why are all of you gay? So like Hake and Dylan, Zelensky, Trump, like you seem to all be gay. Maybe you're not Jewish, but
by that you mean just like weak? Like, what do you mean by? Well, I don't want to get into that. Thank you for your question, Robert. I'll hang up and let Dylan respond. Thanks, man.
Is Dylan gay?
I gotta go. I don't think he is. I think he's everything, right? Aren't you everything? That's what you were on the Fallen State. What a mess. I actually really like, even though I'm a Christian, right? But I liked Destiny's answer at one point was people should not be trying to define themselves so much.
Yeah, I try to. I'm not a big like symbols or like labels person. I don't really like to go around and say, hello, I am X, Y, and Z. Here's the identifiers by which you can know me.
Right.
I feel like you should just get to know somebody. And yeah, so I'm not, I mean, I'll like put a rainbow flag here or there just to, anger the specific people that I know will get annoyed at it. That's the only reason.
Really?
It doesn't even really have an activist angle. I just know that some people will see that and then immediately jump to conclusions and start writing things. And so I just find it fun. Yeah.
So you're a troll. You're like my caller Mark from Los Angeles, California, whom you talked to at the beginning of the show. Dyan Burns. Let's see if I spelled this right. I can't read. I mean, I can't keep track. Dyan Burns 1776 on X. Oh man, I misspelled it. I'm such a boomer.
Did I get banned and I didn't know?
No. Yeah, we went on the Hake report.
Yeah,
and there it is. You have Ukraine, you have the rainbow thing, and that's not
I got the rainbow flag.
And that's not out of activism. It's not out of love, quote unquote, for the agenda. It's for trolling, and you get more engagement this way. Somebody goes to your profile and responds to you.
A little bit. The Ukraine flag and I'm not a big flags guy, but the Ukraine flag, I did it at the start and I just haven't taken it down.
Yeah.
But it also gets the same reaction. Eventually, I would have taken it down like a few months in because people by then would have known my position. It's not, Dyan Burns, what's his stance? You know, it's not that confusing. But because it always gets that reaction, I've chosen to keep it in. I've thought about adding some other flags in there to confuse people.
Right.
But I haven't landed on any.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, let's keep it moving. We have a lot of calls to get to and stuff. So, Jaime in, let's see. Complicated business, folks. I'm a boomer here. I'm running my own show. Jaime in Minnesota on the line. Thank you for calling and holding, man. You're live with Dyan Burns. Oh, Dylan, shift over to your left like 3 inches towards your... Yeah, in the direction of your mic. Thanks. Perfect. Go ahead, Jaime.
Hey, how's it going, Dylan?
It's going good. Surviving.
Hey, I'm gonna have to watch some of your stuff because you're definitely one of the more interesting guests that Hake has on.
Thank you. I appreciate
you explain things. Yeah, you explain things really well. Something that I'm not bored with the facts that you're bringing out. I find them to be very enlightening, and that's what we need is some enlightening stuff instead of garbage. But I disagree with some of your rhetoric about.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the main things that I wanted to talk to you about is the obligation that Americans have to Ukraine. And I see your point where, there's been documents that have been signed and stuff like that. And it would have behooved Ukraine to make themselves better and stronger with all the aid that had gone during the signing. From the signing, I'm not familiar with the dates, but I assume from that time when they were getting aid to now, they could have used that money better to protect themselves against things that they already knew was going to be a problem. What do you think of that?
So in 2014, back when they signed the deal, it was I think it was 1994 was when they signed it. In 1993 or 94, it doesn't really make a difference. But the agreement didn't have to do with the sending of military aid. It had to do with the retrieval of the atomic weapons and the promise that if Ukraine's sovereignty was infringed upon through either coercion, i.e., we're gonna, sanction you until you give up your territory, or like physical force, then the United States would provide assistance. Now, the exact definition of what that assistance meant, whether it meant just some financial support, technical support, that was all left purposely vague by the people who wrote it, probably to give the United States an amount of diplomatic maneuverability. So the aid that we were sending back then was purely like financial and food aid that had to do with the fact that after the Soviet Union collapsed, the children on the street of Ukraine were basically starving to death, to put it lightly, and they were going through a horrible economic crisis. The aid that we did give them, that was military aid, that I would say like they have to make improvements. And I do think there is a truth that if you invest in something, if you don't see a return, then you don't want to just keep dumping your whole in like a burning fire pit. So if we're giving Ukraine all the support and they're not getting any better, then what's the point of continuing to do this if it isn't in the immediate national security interest? Now, I do think there is national security interest, but I would point to back in 2014, Ukraine had 6,000 ready soldiers. 6,000 out of the entirety of the armed forces. Most reports seem to it was really bad. They had other soldiers that were soldiers, but the type of guy who you wouldn't trust to fire a firearm to defend your life, somebody who might pocket half of a paycheck and the other half of the paycheck goes to the commander, and so the commander gets pay, he gets paid to stay home. Isn't that a great deal? And a lot of other instances where, basically people were not up to snuff to be a strong military. A lot of Russian spies, my friends in the room, a lot of Russian spies and stuff like that. So at that period, the Ukrainian armed forces was not in a state that it could really protect Crimea, and it's part of the reason why Crimea fell, is they were not in the state to do so, and the United States asked them to basically give it up. Barack Obama specifically was the president at the time. And so since then, I just want to make this, just to wrap this up and to put the bow on it. Since then, the Ukrainian army has seen extreme improvements. They faced the entirety of the reason the Russians were so confident at the start of this war and they were surprised by what they got is they expected the same thing they saw in 2014. But the Ukrainians used that time to improve, to expand the armed forces, to train, and since then they've continued to improve. And so I will say that yes, the Ukrainian armed forces still has problems with command and control, definitely when it comes to the production of these new units like the 155, but they have definitely made improvements in part due to American technical advising assistance that generals like Ben Hodges have pointed out. So they aren't perfect. They're not exactly to the standards of a U.S. Marine, but they certainly have improved.
They say that Russians are tough and Ukrainians are basically Russians, so they're both tough, right?
So the Ukrainians are basically Russians, but they are both tough, yes.
And what is before I get back to you, Jaime, what is the national security interest of America in like a couple sentences?
Oh, to me, the national security interest in Ukraine or just generally?
U.S. national security interest in Ukraine's security.
Yeah, I think that we have a few national security interests. Not only the fact that we don't want Europe to have to concentrate on holding back Russian advances or invest their security infrastructure there when we want them to support. While we do want them to, of course, build up, we don't want it to be that they cannot assist us in our own security crises. And we want to be there for them when they're there for us. Because, for example, our tariff war with the Chinese, we take about 13 to 16% of their exports, right? Broadly speaking, I can't remember. It's somewhere in there. You get the idea. If we were to include all of our allies in the trade war with China, that would be 65% of their exports. If you have Europe working in America's interests, you increase American capital power, you increase American trade power, you increase American diplomatic power. And so sometimes I will say, yes, we want Europe to be powerful to defend itself, but a Europe that is reliant on us, not entirely, but to lean on us in a security crisis slightly, can be helpful for us when we have to pursue our other interests around the world. For example, maybe a 145% tariff on the Chinese that's trying to lead to beneficial American economic interests. So I think that Europe's defense is in America's interest, on top of the specific commitments and credibility we've made in Ukraine.
I know nothing about this stuff, as you know, but it seems silly to me that the notion that Putin would want to encroach even further into like full-blown Europe.
I think if the only option was armies marching forward, then yes, it would be very silly. Because when people think Putin incursion, invasion, conquering Europe, they just think, okay, he conquers Ukraine, then he conquers this, then he conquers that. But if you look at Eastern European politics right now, when Eastern Europeans talk about Russian incursions or Russian like involvement in their politics, it's not just, oh, what if they bomb us? It's, hey, we just found hundreds of thousands of dollars in the floorboards of this Moldovan politician. Where did he get this money? Oh, he got this money from the Russian intelligence services, and they were trying to get him to give them intelligence on the security apparatus and also getting him to vote certain ways on regulations that would make it harder for them to spy or harder for them to do X, Y, and Z. This is the type of involvement that they're finding. And I think by breaking the internal institutions of the state or trying to engage in institutional control or get allies in places like Romania or elsewhere, the Russians can maybe not have to conquer any country, but you can get a friend in a country, which could then help you apply pressure on other nations. For example, if you have an ally in Romania, which helps sandwich them between Ukraine, that could help you in your war against Ukraine. So I think that if your goal is to imagine Russia marching into Paris, then yes, that's ridiculous. But if you're talking about Russia reestablishing dominance in places that they have historically held territory through both a combination of, direct warfare and direct invasion and subversive actions of the state, dark actions, so to speak.
Okay. Last word, Jaime, go ahead.
Well, I'm a millennial, and like William was saying, we don't want another Vietnam. We don't want another Afghanistan or another Iraq. We don't want a long, forever war. And either, Ukraine does the deal and gives up or whatever. Both sides give up,
They both lose.
America don't want to do another one. Both sides can have their own points of view, and everything that you said about Ukraine, you could say about Russia too. You know what I mean? But this is the world is like a huge prison, and everybody joins a prison gang. And Ukraine.
I'm sorry, I don't really know what you mean. Could you clarify?
Which part?
The world is a prison?
You said that before that.
You said that Russia is the same as Ukraine.
Everything you said about Ukraine, Russia is the same as Ukraine.
Yeah, the apologetics that you gave about Ukraine, the people are this, and the drones, they drone this people. Both sides are doing the exact same thing. Zelensky, the lionizing of Zelensky, it can be said about Putin as well.
I don't think that Zelensky has committed the same crimes as Vladimir Putin, whether it's the crime of state aggression, and
right,
while
like
there
if you
have been
think hard
bombing
enough,
of civilian areas from the Ukrainian side, I'm always worried about either side's use of butterfly mines. What's being documented in Kherson is a phenomenon that I've not found from the Ukrainian armed forces. I mean, it's just they don't post videos of themselves blowing up civilians.
And it may be like a sacred cow kind of thing where you may think that this side is the best or the right side, that you decide not to look at the bad parts of it. You know what I mean? With Ukraine.
No, I try to. I published a report 2 days ago from a deserter who left the 155th Brigade, and he told me about graft. He told me about real corruption. He told me about mismanagement, a lack of training quality. I do my best to cover the bad. It's just I'm telling you that the Ukrainians don't hunt civilians with drones. I have not found that phenomenon. If somebody else had, I'll look at the evidence. Of course, that should stop, but I've just not seen that.
Thank you, Jaime. I appreciate it, man.
Yep.
I got to keep it moving.
I find you to be a very believable guy, so I'll take your word for it. Appreciate it, guys. Okay. You have a good day.
Right. Thank you.
You too. Have a good day.
Before I get to my favorite callers, I have a super chat that I neglected to read yesterday. This has nothing to do with the Ukraine. Is it offensive to say the Ukraine like a boomer?
Ukrainians don't like the Ukraine because they think you're taking away like you're saying, oh, it's just a region, it's not a country. Like if people said like the Russia, it doesn't really roll off the tongue.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, shout out to Ukraine. I like to say it just because it feels so boomerish and it's not politically correct.
I got it.
And I'm sort of rebellious like that. But anyway, a super chat from...
You like to press buttons. I understand.
It's kind of like you flying the rainbow flag. Anyway, Commander Kim, meanwhile in America, or should I say El Salvador, referring to Kilmar, Abrego Garcia, and whatever else his middle name was, the wife of Kilmar. You're familiar with this case, I'm quite sure, Dyan Burns.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the case.
The wife in the court documents says he was MS-13 because Trump insisted that it was on his knuckles to that interviewer. It tattooed it, and not photoshopped. The prison snitches said MS-13. His tattoos say MS-13, but yes, it's totally debatable. Says Commander Kim yesterday with the Rumble rant that I neglected to read yesterday. You're familiar with that thing. Do you have any comment on Trump and his insistence? That,
I think that
Kilmar
the
was
law
at
and order
MS-13?
president should follow what the courts say. And if he is an MS-13 gang member that is such danger to the community, I'm from Maryland. So as somebody who would want me and my family to be safe, I'd like to see him prove it in the court of law because I think he risks damaging the image of his immigration operation from the get-go when this is one of the few issues that he's still polling relatively okay with Americans, but he's starting to poll bad. And so he needs to dot his I's and cross his T's, and he needs to make sure that the qualified people are in the positions managing this, because if he doesn't, he could end up having more scandals like this where women are deported to men's prisons, or there's the gay Venezuelan hairdresser that was deported, or just the lack of acknowledgement of the courts when they give an order, which just becomes more legal problems for the president down the stream.
It is an issue. Who's out of line here, Trump or the judges? Or both?
I think Trump. I think ultimately the president of the United States needs to understand that his power is not absolute. He needs to be able to be answerable to something, some other institution. And right now, Congress is controlled by his party. It's controlled by an institution that agrees with him, say the House and the Senate. And so we, as three co-equal branches of government, have a third branch, the judicial branch, that is supposed to make sure that no one man or one party can take over both the legislative and executive branch and then just completely change the system without having to go in and change the Constitution or having to, run things by Congress. For example, getting rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was created by Congress after the 2008 financial crisis, without going to Congress, which was the institution that created it,
and
therefore
DOGE?
can be the only institution that can destroy it.
Is that DOGE doing?
That was the work of DOGE, the funny haha DOGE.
Okay, nice. I appreciate you weighing in on that. I have to get back. Oh, how are you doing on time, Dylan? Can you do
I have time.
Okay.
I can do a few more if you want me to do a few more callers. Sure.
Okay, I appreciate it. My favorite caller from the sundown town of Dayton, Ohio, beautiful Maze. You're live with Dyan Burns. Thanks for holding.
Hello, Dylan. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, well, you the toilet seat people, they always talk about IQ. They don't have one because you're there and you know what's going on and you're trying to explain to the toilet seat people.
Who's toilet seat people? You talking about? What's that mean? What's that coming from?
Some of your callers, I put it that way. Because if you hear a person say that they dropped the bomb in Yemen and look what they did and it's good, they should do. You got them thinking of a war over here and they don't care about treaties and no place else. All they want to say is all about me, me, me. But Dylan, you explained to them, but they didn't catch it and don't understand it. Well, didn't they train those soldiers over here?
Which soldiers?
In Ukraine.
The Ukrainian soldiers?
Over here and train them?
We trained Ukrainians here in America?
Excellent, Dylan.
We NATO trainers helped train the Ukrainians in NATO. Ben Hodges and some other NATO trainers through the Americans working with NATO helped train a lot of their soldiers. Is part of the reason why Russia had so much trouble in 2022. It's not the only reason. Ukrainians did a lot of it on their own, but it's because they did improve since where they were in 2014. Russia wasn't expecting those improvements.
Yes, and so when you find people like Mark that don't understand and don't catch it, always something's the matter with low IQ. If you don't have an IQ, you sit on the toilet and let everybody flush everything into you. But anyway, as I was saying, if you make a deal with somebody, and my question is, why did Trump try to make a deal for them to give up their land?
Because he wants peace and he wants them to
James,
make
you don't know nothing about it. I'm talking to somebody that's there enough.
Okay, fine. I'll be quiet.
Thank you.
Beautiful Maze. So why did Trump want them to give up land, Dylan?
I think Trump wants Ukraine to give up land because he thinks that it's a quick way to end the war.
Yeah.
But I don't think that a quick way is necessarily the best way if it means the war starts again in a few years. So I hope that no matter what the territorial lines look like, there are security architecture put in place, a mechanism by which if the Russians attack again, there will be such a consequence that will dissuade them from attacking. They'll say, I don't want to do this. I don't want to put my hand in the mousetrap, so to speak. That's what I care about most. But of course, I think people should get their homes back.
But yes, I think so too. And then when it comes to war and evil people, you hear them talk about war and fighting all the time, and they put it on other people. But my last question to you, if they should put a shield when they make a deal with people, put a shield over the people that they made a deal with, so the people that they didn't make a deal with, or to stop them from where they started them, and keep them in the track so they won't go and try to take other people's land all around the world. And it'd be a better place for people to live in, and we wouldn't have to see war.
That's a nice thought.
Yeah.
You all have a good day.
Thank
and the
you.
toilet seat talkers, in their opinion, go down and flush. You flush it every day. Have a good one.
Wow. Okay. You
have
too,
a good
Mace.
one. Have a blessed day.
And lastly, let me get to Ardene, beautiful Ardene out of Colorado. Thank you, Ardene, for holding. How you doing?
Hi.
Hey.
How you doing?
Fine.
Hey, actually, Colorado Springs. We have 5 military bases here. Well, actually, 6.
Sweet.
But yeah, ground zero basically. I wanted to tell you, thank you, Dylan, for being educated with what you were stating. It's very refreshing. It's dealing with the news broadcast that they have out the network and all that. Everything is one-sided a lot, depending on what you want to hear.
Very one-sided.
I'm going more towards podcasts. Well,
you're talking about news. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the podcast a lot more that's why I listen to like Hank and all that, to get information, because I like it better. It's more truthful. It's people as they're actually studying and working to find out the information instead of just taking what their producer is telling them to do, basically. I do appreciate it. But I do understand that I'm from the Vietnam era. My friends and relatives, Vietnam, a lot of them did not come back. Vietnam was fought for a lot of reasons, not just communist aggression, what we were told as a lie. It was done basically for exporting a cash crop, opiates. That was a big, the Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, they were cash crops. They needed it to get to the United States. It's been documented, a lot of stuff. They knew that we had cash over here to get a lot of, that's why a lot of the Vietnamese or the people, the service members over there, my friends and relatives, came back as addicts if they didn't die over there. It's horrifying. And like as far as Trump is painting himself into a corner, he's not the smartest bulb in the thing here. The Republican, the leadership I like to follow, that I look respect at, is the Eisenhower type. That is the man of power to me.
What was he like? Because nobody knows. Well, I don't know what Eisenhower was like. What was he like that you respected so much?
I was a child, but he was a general. First off, he was well aware. He warned the people of the military-industrial complex. He knew what was coming, and I worked in Department of Defense for years. I saw a lot of stuff that happened, and a lot of war is based. Vietnam was basically, and its war is made to help economies within the world. We make money off of wars, hate to say it. And, I mean, we cannot we cannot be the isolationist that we would want to be, what people say. We have, how many bases do we have throughout the war or the world? We have bases everywhere. We've made our presence everywhere in the world. We cannot walk away from that. Globally, we are there economically with the world. We can't walk away from it now. We've started the ball rolling. We can't walk away from it. If we walk away from it, I would think it would be sheer disaster for us as a country to pull out for anything, economically and internationally for defense. I think we made bad decisions along the way pertaining to money and everything, and we're paying the price now. And thank you so much for listening to me. That's what I had to say. And Dylan, I really, really do appreciate what you had to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ardene.
Thank you for the kind words.
Eisenhower, good or evil, or you don't know?
I can't really say enough because I don't know enough about Ike. I just know that we like Ike.
Okay.
We like him.
I do have a few super chats, Dylan, that some pertain to you. Lin Yan Chen says, oh no, not this moron mouth breather lost in delusion that making language more explicit is adding context rather than subtracting elegance of the elements that are implicitly stated via proper use of wording, phrasing. Dylan gasping burns brain cells, says Lin Yan Chen. And he also goes, Lord Goodhair, in the infant stage of language, as you see with birds, dolphins, whales, singers, acoustic geometry is center of syntax grammar to the detached / R-worded etarded ray. Also known as intellectual, this is not so. They favor...
That's a lot of $3 donations.
Yeah, they are. I'm going to try to get through all of them because some of them do pertain. They favor being explicit due to missing proprioception. I've seen that word before. I looked it up before then. He says, tell the Moton guest, which might mean moron guest, that his clumsiness is the very same reason why he cannot feel the geometry of every word and thus overuses suffix and leans on moron phrasing linked to meaning divorced from said phrasing. All you mouth breathers do this. Dylan goes blah, blah, blah. Translation, Dylan was a war pervert since childhood, just seeking the thrill that people used to pay top dollar for 50 years ago. Oh, yeah. Lord Goodhair, this broken sexual is a silly mess, just a cheap thrill seeker, says Lin Yan Chen towards Dylan Burns. Nice. And then real quick, Benjamin bought 3 coffees for Dylan. Can you elaborate on the Ukrainians getting kidnapped in the streets? I'm not sure if this has been covered. Thank you.
I assume... moving off from my perverted thrill seeking, I assume that this is in reference to conscription policies where the Ukrainian armed forces, and one of the ways to conscript people is they will check your documents on the street. And so it's not that the way that the videos usually get posted is they post the end of the interaction where somebody starts freaking out. So somebody takes out a phone and starts recording. And at that point, a conscription officer is grabbing them and throwing them in the back of the van. Usually what happens is they find somebody, they ask them to check if they're registered with the Ukrainian Armed Forces, that if they've submitted their documents, they then check their documents on their phone to make sure that they've, that they aren't like trying to dodge the draft system by not submitting the proper documents. And if you've submitted the proper documents and you've gone through the system and that you haven't been raffled out, then you're supposed to be, at that point, let go. If they find out that you aren't in the system or that you have been called up and you've just been dodging them, at that point, they will detain you and then bring you into the van. And that's where a lot of these videos where people are freaking out or running away are coming from, is because it's people who are explicitly trying to avoid the draft and or they aren't in the system.
I have a one other Rumble rant for you. Does Dylan consider himself an investigative journalist, reporter, or something else?
I guess I consider myself a conflict journalist, a war reporter. I'm mostly concentrated on covering conflict, but I mean we do investigations on war crimes. We do investigations, so I just want to refer to myself as an investigative reporter first.
And Manuel bought a coffee over on Buy Me a Coffee with a link to a Gateway Pundit article, 2025 May. Putin's proposed Victory Day truce is effect no, and I'm not sure what this is saying. And
I think it's a link, right?
Yeah. So,
but I do want to throw out there also my colleague who's here just told me, who works with Offbeat Research too, that my material is reviewed by investigative reporters who go through the proper processes and stuff like that. But I'm not. Right. Somebody who goes and looks at the angle of the artillery shell to double and triple check. That's not my job. Yeah, they say they have other people who are better than math to do that.
This is from Manuel. He shares this headline from the Gateway Pundit. Putin's proposed Victory Day truce is in effect. No Russian drones over Ukraine. Kiev, and they spell it Kiev. Very Russian, right? Already accused of breaching the ceasefire almost 500 times. Reporting May 8th, that's today, I believe, by Paul Sarin. Have you heard anything about this?
Yeah, so Vladimir Putin announced that he would be doing, and he announced this a week or 2 weeks in advance. So Trump demanded a unilateral ceasefire by both Ukraine and Russia, and Ukraine said yes, and then Russia said no. And then after Ukraine kept demanding it, at the end of last month, they said, okay, we'll do a 72-hour ceasefire during the Victory Day period. And then Ukraine said in response, no, do an immediate ceasefire now. We want a 30-day ceasefire like Trump asked for. Let's do what Trump asked for. And the Russians said, no, we want to do this ceasefire. One of Trump's advisors, Keith Kellogg, said that, they don't really take the ceasefire offer as serious. Trump responded that he wanted it to be longer. And so the Ukrainians haven't really treated this ceasefire proposal with much respect. And so it's probably the case that on many parts of the front, the Ukrainians have fired on Russian positions. But considering how the last ceasefire Putin announced is, there's also a high likelihood that on the areas where the Russians want to push forward, like around Pokrovsk, that they're probably still some amount of fighting. But I haven't checked with my contacts there. It's just I have yet to see any ceasefire since the start of 2022 actually hold. So the most likely scenario is they just continued to fire at each other.
What a mess. That's crazy, man. No end in sight. Is that the bottom line? No end in sight?
Yep, that's what Vance said too.
But anything could happen.
I just wish that people knew that 4 months ago.
Terrible. Yeah, it's interesting. It's pretty crazy. One thing that you mentioned about before I let you go, I appreciate your time, man. By the way, Dylan,
I give you as much time as I can give you every time, Hake.
Dylan Burns 1776 on X. Dylan Burns Live. You seem to be more active on that currently on that YouTube channel. Is that correct?
Well, Dyan Burns TV is where I release my documentaries. And this Saturday, I'm releasing an embed, a 40-minute video where I embed with the Skaval battalions, which are the convict soldiers in the Ukrainian prison system who have signed contracts to join the army and fight on the worst parts of the front in exchange for them getting freedom after the war. That's going to be released this Saturday on Dyan Burns TV, my main YouTube channel.
Okay, nice. Congratulations on that. I like some of that work. I listened to the whole thing of that one, the Safari one, because I caught wind of that, and it's interesting hearing them speak in their own language like that about what's going on. And it was cool hearing you releasing their folk music. That was nice. Was that ever?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure all my documentaries include some Ukrainian folk music, Ukrainian music, because I really want to not only just like promote the language, but I think a lot of it's very beautiful. And I think, you know, if I'm going to be in an area, you know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Every once in a while, though, I want to throw in like some ABBA or some Motorhead, you know, but I can't. I don't have the rights to it. So I'll stick with the pretty folk music.
I know. I released my stuff on SoundCloud, and SoundCloud has deleted a bunch of my stuff because I was playing copyrighted Christian music. and so I have a lot of episodes missing. But Dyan Burns TV is where you can find your stuff, as well as I think I see.
Those are some really old ones
stuff.
Because we privated a lot of the old stuff. But there's the documentaries right there.
Nice.
Russians' Humans Hunting Ground in Kherson, and we're releasing another one in 2 days. So I hope people check it out.
Good luck, man. Last quick question on this situation in America with the immigration. I feel that America has been too kind for too long, and now a lot of illegal aliens are entrenched in America. They have kids here, grandkids here, great-grandkids here probably. And I really appreciate what Trump is doing. I get that there's a lot of people perhaps slipping through the cracks who maybe shouldn't, or they should be worked with better. But overall, I like it. I love it. And I don't think these judges are right to be imposing. I don't think they have a right to impose on his execution of the law. But go ahead.
So I think that it's important that they have that right. I think it's important that the President of the United States answers to somebody. Because let's just think about what President Trump is doing on a daily basis when it comes to the use of the executive office. Now, I am of the opinion that both for Obama, Biden, Trump, every president, that the president just has too much power.
Yeah.
I think that Congress should have much more power, and that while we can believe that there are good men amongst us who can represent us on the national stage, to trust this much power within the power of the presidency is dangerous. And one example of that is that Donald Trump keeps using emergency powers to issue executive orders. And that's how he issued his tariffs. That's how he's issued most of the executive orders that are the ones that grab the headlines. And recently, he issued an emergency executive order to issue a 100% tariff on foreign imported films. So Japanese cartoons, French films. And now look, maybe, is this that important? Not really. It'll make it more difficult for me to watch like Italian Western movies. That, you know, so maybe it'll hurt me in that area or whatever. But what's important here is the emergency powers are only supposed to be used in emergencies, in national security situations where, oh my gosh, America's, you know, there's a huge problem. We need to use the emergency powers.
Uh-huh.
And he's using them to do any just about face in American policy. We want to issue these tariffs, we're going to use the emergency powers. We're going to do this, we're going to use the emergency powers. And so I think it is up to the judicial branch to make sure that presidents do not abuse the tools at their disposal, because we didn't really properly safety check the tools we gave our government above us and over us. And so when the president is told, hey, before you deport this man, make sure he's not an American citizen, I believe that the president should have to heel, because the rights of any one man is more powerful than the president of the United States. That's what I believe. The rights of every citizen, when it comes to my free speech rights, the president doesn't just get to trump that. He doesn't get to say, Dylan, you can't speak anymore. You emergency powers, you can't speak anymore. Or emergency powers, you must be deported. And so the judicial system is supposed to be there to act as a defense for us. So I'm not saying judicial activism doesn't exist. I'm not saying that there aren't any any judges that are bad in their judgment, but that is the work of the bar and of organizations that monitor ethics. That doesn't mean we get rid of the guardrails for our democracy and making sure we don't say, I want small government, and by small government, just one man.
All right. I do think it is a real emergency, but...
These Japanese cartoons are dangerous.
Yeah, get them out of here. Anyway, 3 minutes. Do you have 3 minutes?
Sure, 3 minutes. Why not?
Rick in Hampton, VA is on the line here. Rick, you're live with Dyan Burns, and then we got to wrap up.
What's going on there, Brother James?
Not much, man. Just wrapping up the show before Joel Friday TV comes on live.
Well, man, thanks for taking my call, man. I just want to man, you know, it seems like it just cracks me up, man, when you see all these judges popping their head up out the water saying, oh, Trump can't do this. It's illegal to deport them. But yet, Biden's #1 job was to protect the border, and he didn't, and you didn't hear a peep out these judges. Not a peep.
I know, because they're on their side.
Nothing.
That's what I say.
That exactly. I say the same thing, James. I'm like, okay, so you talking about President
Let's
Trump
hear what Dylan has to say about that, though, because we don't have a lot of time.
Okay, go ahead.
Well,
go ahead.
I think the judges would have to prove that the President of the United States was actively, in each instance where these people are illegally crossing the border into the United States, that he was performing an illegal act or he was ignoring court orders in order to hold them accountable. You can't just put charges against the president because somebody came into the country illegally.
But how about if the government they refuse to enforce the law and they change the enforcement so that they just letting them in like crazy? And I guess Biden did that even worse.
Well,
than
I would
maybe
say that it's really hard because you'd have to prove intent, right? Because somebody could just, how do you argue somebody's because you could just make the argument, no, Biden isn't. He's not letting them in. He's just terrible at his job. He's an old man. What do you expect from an old man? He's asleep at the wheel. You could argue probably all you'd have to do is convince a judge that there's reasonable doubt that he wasn't, actively going in there and trying to let them in if you wanted to prove this. And so for me, it's just a lot easier to imagine that, no judge is going to think that they have a chance at being able to prove the intent of the President of the United States to allow illegals into the country on purpose. I mean, you can't even prove that really with an article yet, let alone in a court case.
Interested. What a mess, huh? The whole culture is for being too kind.
And I agree with that too, James. But my thing is, that's the president's job to protect the country.
Right.
And especially the borders. If you're talking about human trafficking, drugs, and it all starts at the border. That's his duty, by even being in charge of the military.
It's so true, man.
And he pulled them back and just open the door and just let anybody come in and didn't care who came in. And that's his constitutional right to protect the borders. I mean,
your phone is really awful, Rick. You're breaking up really bad, but I appreciate it. Your point is taken. Take care, Rick. Take care.
It is true that it is the right of the president to protect the border, his constitutional right. It's also the constitutional right for the judges to hold the president to account and to the standards of the Constitution. Who upholds the Constitution but the people who interpret it, the judges?
Nice, man. I appreciate your time. Dyan Burns, 1776 Dyan Burns TV on YouTube, and his second channel, Dyan Burns Live. It's good to see you again, man. I wish you well over there and also in Maryland.
Thank you. Maryland always needs well wishes. Okay, I'm worried about flying back into Ronald Reagan International Airport, coming back on home.
Indeed.
The FAA is having we're having a lot of close calls with helicopters. Did you see there was another close call?
No.
With a helicopter on a Ronald Reagan? There was another one.
Well, I'll be praying, man. Take care.
I appreciate it. You have a good one. See you later.
Bye-bye. Guys, this has been the Hake Report. Joel Friday TV coming up next. Peace in the Middle East and in Ukraine. Bye.
James.
Morning, Tim.